Hello everyone, welcome back to Daska Discusses. Well, today I'm going to be looking at, the last of the prequels by George Lucas in the Star Wars series. Yep, I'm talking about Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Let's do this. Made in 2005, Revenge of the Sith, I remember vividly going to a midnight session to watch this. And, I guess you could say after Episode 1 and 2, there was a lot of pressure for George Lucas to see what he could do. Could he actually redeem himself for what was Episode 1 and 2? Now, I know in the comments of my previous reviews on Episode 1 and 2, there's been a lot of, to and froing about people who did like it, people who didn't like it as well. I gave my reviews on that. Now for Episode 3, let's talk about whether or not I think it was actually a good film. We'll talk about the good parts, the bad parts for me, and my favorite parts, and I'll give you my rating out of 10. So let's start off with, the bad parts of Episode 3. Before we get into the bad parts, let's just talk briefly about the storyline of Episode 3. The thing is with Episode 3 is that you're following Anakin and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's trying to figure out what's going on here with, is there some sort of spy happening? You've got Anakin who's working as a double agent for the Jedi Council and for Palpatine, trying to find out other info as well. You've got General Grievous. You've got a lot of things happening, but then the majority of the first half of the film deals with that. And then I guess you can say, you will say that the second half of the film turns into more of a darker type story with, we see, spoiler alert, with Anakin, basically being manipulated by Chancellor Palpatine, with having all these nightmares about Padme dying in childbirth, gets this idea from Palpatine about Darth Plagueis and how Darth Plagueis, knew how to, the midichlorians to stop him from dying, gets obsessed with this kind of concept and turns to the dark side in order to learn this kind of skill and does some really, really dark things. So, and then it concludes the whole series on a really interesting note, and I must say, I'm a big fan of Episode 3, but let's look at the bad points of Episode 3. Now, first off, the one little pet peeve that I had in Episode 3 is definitely the opening sequence. Not just the opening where you've got that whole space battle with Obi-Wan and Anakin, but that whole 20-25 minutes, I think it goes for maybe 20 minutes of them on that space battle, getting into that ship and then getting in there and then finding Palpatine there as a prisoner. Then Dooku comes on there, they have their little battle. Anakin kills Dooku, which is again a really interesting way to start the film. I mean, it's meant to be a kids film. This is definitely not a kids film per se. I mean, here in Australia it's rated M. That part doesn't bother me that much. It's more afterwards when they've, he's picked up Obi-Wan, he's got the Chancellor, and they go onto that ship, and then it's, it's like they have to crash land on Coruscant, I'm pretty sure it is, and the whole first, 15-20 minutes of the film does tend to drag on a bit. And I know, look, you're gonna have to have some sort of big opening sequence, but one of the bad parts for me is definitely the opening sequence there, when you've got Grievous and the ship and then the crash landing, and then it's just a bit too much CGI for my liking. Reminds me a bit of Episode 2. That was one of my bad parts of Episode 3, is definitely the opening sequence. One of my second points that I don't really like in the film is the Obi-Wan and Grievous chase. Not so much the battle that he has within the lightsaber fight, but that whole chase when Obi-Wan gets on that animal, that lizard or dinosaur, whatever the hell it is, and Grievous is on that weird kind of wheelbarrow, one unicycle kind of thing. Again, with the CG and that annoying sound that animal makes, it kind of gets annoying. So for me, that whole sequence there, way too much CG. Not a big fan of that whole chase between Obi-Wan and Grievous. Now, I'm not saying the whole... Look, Episode 3, I think in terms of CG compared to Episode 1 and 2 isn't as bad, but again, if you watch the making of it, which I've had many times, you'd find out that a lot of it is still behind green screens and CG, but I don't think it's as saturated as much as Episode 2, especially in Episode 2's last battle sequences as well. Another point for me that I'm not a big fan of is the way, look, I understand Anakin, he's really upset about what the nightmares he's having, and he starts doing those jobs for Palpatine, and he basically, helps him kill Windu in a way. And the way he just kneels down and he's like, yes, now you're Lord Vader, and he's like, yes, I'll do whatever you say, Master. I just felt that whole transitioning of him being good into totally evil and then going and killing all the younglings as well and doing all this evil stuff was a bit too quick for my liking. But hey, how else could they have done it? They could have maybe gone a bit more detailed on that and maybe seen a bit more of a progression. In my opinion, I just think that whole turning from him to the light side to the dark is done a little bit too quickly. And my last bad point, you could say, this is actually part of my good points as well, but specifically, the bad point I'm not a big fan of is the Obi-Wan and Anakin lightsaber fight. Although, yes, it does go a bit too long, but yeah, we all know that. It's just that there's certain parts of it that did annoy me, and the one part that does annoy me with the Anakin Obi-Wan fight is definitely the parts where they're actually on the lava and they're balancing on those droids or whatever. I think Anakin's on a droid and Obi-Wan's on that other metal part before they get to the, the high ground thing as well. Just that part there where Anakin's like balancing on the droids and they're still fighting. They should have just kept it all on land, to be honest. So those are my bad parts that I didn't enjoy, the parts that I think are a bit iffy for me. The good parts, let's just start with saying that Episode 3 is a meme goldmine, and out of all the Star Wars films, Episode 3, I think just about every line in this, they've turned it into a meme somehow, and you can go search online and find it, but there's some really good lines in this, and there's some really good memes that have been released, so yeah. Episode 3, in terms of like the good points, it's a meme goldmine. I know it's not directly linked to the film, but that's just gets me thinking like every single line, I am the Senate. I just love it, yeah. Now the good points. Well, I gotta say that the good points of Revenge of the Sith is definitely, the acting in it is definitely raised the bar big time from episode 1 and 2. You've got Hayden Christensen that is actually not manageable, but he's actually bearable in this, and I think he plays a really good role from being like the whiny guy that he was in episode 2. In this, he's definitely matured, and I like the look of him. I like the way they've done the costumes, the set design, apart from obviously all the green screen and stuff like that. But the soundtrack, another great point for me, A+. Where do you go from it? Well, there's a mixture of a lot of things from like the old trilogy as well, mixed into this as well. But the battle, the heroes battle, or the what's it called? Can't remember. The theme when Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting is a really good theme as well, which I think is up there in the top 10 themes in all the Star Wars films. It's just memorable, and it really works well with that. John Williams did a really good job in the soundtrack for episode 3. The Obi-Wan and Anakin fight, again, even though it is a bit long, in terms of good points, I think it really does do well in terms of showing how you've got, really, the best friends fighting, and that they can't match each other's style, or they got the same style, so that's why they can't literally clash, and how it goes from inside that building on Mustafar to outside, and then I think it just really is done well. Just a tad too long in my liking though. Another good point for me was definitely the Vader creation, not when he's speaking, but more so when you see him getting built. I thought the music, and juxtapose that with the editing that's happening in another scene as well, is really good. How you see the arms and legs coming on, and then the mask finally comes on, and then you hear that click, and then Vader's breathing was done really well. So that's a good point. Now my favorite parts of the film. So I've given you my good points, my bad points. Now my favorite parts are as follows. Definitely up there is Palpatine telling Anakin about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis. Yes, you gotta love that, where it's just really good storytelling, really good dialogue, and the way Palpatine, Ian McDiarmid, the way he actually gives that speech and tells him everything about Darth Plagueis is really good. And it's a shame that they didn't use any of that kind of mythos in episode 8 and 9. Who knows, maybe in in episode 7 and 8. Who knows, maybe in episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, maybe they'll do something with that, who knows. But it's good to see that the Emperor will be back in some sort of form in Rise of Skywalker. One of my favorite parts, another one, is the high ground part, when basically Obi-Wan's saying to Anakin, "It's over, Anakin, I have the high ground," and then we all know what happens, then he chops his legs off and he's sitting there burning, and Obi-Wan's telling him, "You were the chosen one, you were my brother, I loved you." That was really good. That's one of my favorite parts. Some great acting there by Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen. It's quite dark as well, the way he's melting away. But yeah, one of my favorite parts is that as well. And my final favorite part of the film is a real subtle one. It's where Anakin is, it's in the middle of the film before he's turned evil, obviously, before he's turned to the dark side, where he's thinking about Padme, he's looking out the window in Coruscant, and then Padme's on the other side of the city as well, and there's no dialogue. It's just this really eerie, kind of really good atmospheric soundtrack happening, but they're looking outside, and it keeps cutting back and forth between them. I thought that was really good. That was a really, really well edited and real well shot part from George Lucas. I'll give him that. Now, in summing up, before I give my out of 10 ranking on this and my rating on it, let's talk about episode 3 as a whole. Yes, I could understand how people, and I've got friends that think this as well, that that it really drags out, and that I've got friends that think that basically, yeah, it's still in the same league as episode 1 and 2. I definitely don't agree with that. I think episode 3 does hold a really good place in my heart in terms of the Star Wars film, and I can put it in the Blu-ray player these days. I can put it on and actually watch it without cringing too much. Yes, there is a few cringeworthy scenes, and some of the dialogue between Anakin and Padme, you know, that lovey-dovey dialogue does get a bit cheesy, but you know, it's George Lucas's writing, right? But I think as a whole, it's the best out of the prequels, definitely, for sure. And if anything, look, I know it's been a while since it's been out as well, but I've definitely seen this a lot more times than I had watched, you know, Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Even though I know it's been out a long time, what I'm saying is that when I got Revenge of the Sith on DVD back in the day, I watched it a lot more times than what I have with The Last Jedi, definitely. Force Awakens I've seen a lot more than The Last Jedi, but we'll get to those reviews another day, shall we? Oh boy, they're going to be interesting. The first half of the film, yes, does drag a bit. There's a lot of dialogue, a lot of toing and froing. You know, you've even got another good part that I didn't even mention is Yoda and Palpatine's fight. That actually does work well as well. There's some other really good points in here. I could talk about it all day, but I'm not going to. This is just a discussion on what my good points, bad points were, and my favorite parts, right? But the second half of the film really does pick up, and the narrative does really well, and it's really well gelled, and it ends this prequel trilogy that George Lucas made really well. And it's a good lead up into, you know, straight into episode 4, 5, and 6. But as I always say, you know, I've got students that ask me, oh, Mr. D, you know, how, you know, what's the order to watch them in? And I always tell them, episode 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, and then you want to go to 7 and 8 if you really wish to. Now, overall, I'd have to say with Revenge of the Sith, you know, I gave you guys my rankings for episode 1 and 2, and I'm trying to get all these done before Rise of Skywalker comes out at the end of the year, so that's why I thought, well, I better get them out. So, my episode 3, out of 10, I've got to give Revenge of the Sith a 7.5 out of 10. Yep, I think it's definitely worth that, and look guys, let me know what you thought in the comments of Revenge of the Sith. If you like this video, please leave a like. Leave a comment like I just said, and if you haven't subscribed already and you want to keep up to date with all my videos, please hit the subscribe bell and, well, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you can be notified if you want to, and I'll see you guys on the next episode on Daska Discusses. Boom!